The silence in the Bel Air mansion was not the silence of peace, but the silence of extinction. Charles Harrington, a man whose net worth was measured in 9 figures, found himself staring at the calendar, watching the numbers tick down to zero in a way money could not stop. 67 years old, a lifetime spent building an empire in aerospace components, and now the diagnosis: stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He had 3 months, maybe 4, if the experimental treatments worked their minor miracles. The mansion was too large, the marble floors too cold, the absence of life echoing in every vast, empty corridor. His only constant companion was Mrs. Johnson, the housekeeper, a woman who had served his family for 30 years and whose gaze now held a heavy mixture of pity and deep, unspoken affection. Charles stood by the large bay window, overlooking a meticulously manicured lawn that stretched down towards Sunset Boulevard. His gaze, however, always drifted to one specific door on the second floor. It was mahogany, slightly recessed, and had been locked precisely 5 years, 3 months, and 17 days ago. It was Clara's room. His daughter's room. He hadn't touched the knob since the funeral. The very thought of the dust settling on her favorite books, the light dying on her pastel drawings, was enough to suffocate him. The pain of her loss, a sudden, brutal traffic accident, had become the only thing real in his life, and now he was facing his own end, completely alone, with no one to inherit the vastness he had spent his life accumulating, and certainly no one who understood the depth of the void Clara had left behind. Mrs. Johnson approached him slowly, her steps muffled by the thick Persian rug. She carried a silver tray with a weak cup of tea. "Mr. Harrington, you haven't eaten a full meal since Monday," she said, her voice soft but firm, a tone she had earned the right to use over decades. "The doctor said you need to keep your strength up." Charles sighed, turning from the window, his eyes hollow. Strength for what, Mrs. Johnson? To sign more papers? To feel the walls closing in more slowly? He hated the pity, but he knew her concern was genuine. She was the closest thing he had to family now, but even she couldn't break through the ice surrounding his heart. He looked at the vast dining hall, easily seating 20, and realized he hadn't hosted anyone for years. He was the wealthiest hermit in Los Angeles, preparing to leave a fortune that would ultimately be squabbled over by distant, opportunistic cousins he barely remembered. The thought was galling. Meanwhile, 3 miles away, on the scorching pavement of a major intersection near Santa Monica, 10-year-old Mia shielded her eyes from the relentless midday sun. Her small hands gripped a basket filled with assorted candies and bottled water. The air was thick with exhaust fumes and the desperate energy of a city always rushing somewhere. Mia wasn't rushing. She was waiting. Waiting for the red light, waiting for a kind face, waiting for enough change to make a difference. Her thin t-shirt was damp with sweat, but she didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Every single dollar, every quarter earned, went directly to the medicine her mother needed. Her mother, Elena, was crippled by a debilitating autoimmune disorder that had progressed rapidly over the last year. They lived in a cramped, humid apartment where the air conditioner was broken, and Elena spent her days weak, feverish, but always managing a smile for Mia when she returned home. Mia was sharp, resilient, and utterly focused. She knew the rhythm of the intersection. The morning rush was good for coffees and cheap gum. The midday lull required aggressive selling of water bottles to tired construction workers. The evening was best for high-end chocolate sales to couples driving home from expensive dinners. Today, the heat was brutal, slowing traffic and tempers. The light turned red, and Mia moved immediately, her practiced smile snapping into place. "Hi, sir. Can I offer you a cold bottle of water or maybe a chocolate bar for later? It's really hot today." Most people ignored her, staring straight ahead, insulated by the bubble of their luxury cars. Some offered a dismissive shake of the head. But Mia kept moving. She didn't let the rejection sting. Rejection was just part of the job. She focused on the 5th car in the lane, a massive obsidian black sedan that looked entirely out of place in the common traffic. It was Charles's vehicle, being driven by his chauffeur, Arthur, on a meaningless errand designed solely to get Charles out of the oppressive silence of the mansion. Charles was slumped in the back seat, staring blankly at the scrolling stock tickers on his private phone. Nothing mattered. The markets were irrelevant. He felt the car brake gently. Arthur announced, "Red light, sir." Charles simply nodded, his mind drifting back to the mahogany door. 5 years. He hadn't even let Mrs. Johnson clean the room. It was a mausoleum of memories, untouched and protected by his grief. Suddenly, a tap on the bulletproof window startled him. He looked up, annoyed by the interruption, and saw a child. A small girl with wide, intelligent brown eyes, framed by hair pulled back into a messy, practical ponytail. She held up a small, cellophane-wrapped packet of chewing gum. "Sir," she mouthed through the thick glass, offering a sweet smile that seemed impossibly cheerful given the scorching environment. Charles felt a momentary flicker of something akin to guilt. How could so much vitality exist so close to his own internal decay? He lowered the electric window a fraction, letting in a blast of hot, dusty air and the roar of the city. He didn't want gum. He hadn't chewed gum in 30 years. "How much for the gum?" he asked, his voice gravelly from disuse. Mia stepped closer, adjusting her basket. $2, sir. But I also have this beautiful dark chocolate bar, handmade, $3. It's perfect for cheering someone up. Cheering someone up, Charles thought darkly. An impossible task. He looked at her basket, noticing the worn edges, the way she kept the bills neatly separated from the change. There was a desperate professionalism about her. "Why are you out here in this heat, little one? School is still in session, isn't it?" Mia paused, but her smile didn't falter, though her eyes momentarily clouded with deep seriousness. "School finished early, sir. And my mom is sick. She needs medicine that costs a lot of money. I sell these things so she can get better. It's important work." Charles felt a sharp, unexpected twist in his chest. It wasn't the pity he felt for himself, but an overwhelming recognition of shared burden. This small girl, barely old enough to cross the street alone, carried the weight of her family's survival. "What kind of medicine does she need?" he asked. Mia didn't hesitate, listing the generic names with practiced speed. "They are expensive, sir. This week we need $140 for the prescription refill. I am still $30 short." Charles reached into his inner suit pocket and pulled out his wallet, a slim alligator skin container holding a thick sheaf of $100 bills. He pulled out 2. "Take this," he said, pressing the money into her small, sweaty hand. "And keep the chocolate." Mia's eyes widened, not with greed, but with shock and profound relief. $200. That was almost 2 weeks of selling. "Oh, thank you, sir," she breathed, clutching the bills like precious jewels. "You are an angel. You are saving her life." The green light flashed, and Arthur gently pulled the car forward. Charles didn't look at the stock market anymore. He looked back through the rear window, watching Mia stand there, still holding the money, overwhelmed. He felt a sensation he hadn't experienced in years: connection. The sheer, unadulterated goodness of her purpose felt like a splash of cold water on his fossilized heart. That evening, back in the mausoleum of his mansion, Charles couldn't shake the image of Mia's earnest face. He asked Mrs. Johnson to bring him a drink, something stronger than tea. "Mrs. Johnson, have you ever met someone so young who carried so much responsibility?" Mrs. Johnson, polishing silver in the corner, looked up. "Life is unfair, Mr. Harrington. Some people are burdened before they are strong enough to carry it. Did you meet someone today?" "Yes. A little girl selling candy. She's working to buy medicine for her mother. I gave her some money." He didn't mention the amount. Mrs. Johnson nodded wisely. "That was a kind thing to do, sir. But kindness is often temporary. She will be back out there tomorrow. The illness will still be there." Her words struck a nerve. Temporary kindness. That was his whole life lately, temporary existence, temporary pain relief. He realized that giving her the money hadn't been an act of charity, but an act of selfishness. It made him feel slightly less dead. He needed to see her again. The next day, Charles insisted Arthur drive him back to the same intersection, waiting patiently for the red light. Mia was there again, though her basket looked slightly fuller, maybe because she'd restocked with the money he'd given her. When she approached his window this time, her smile was deeper, recognizing him immediately. "Hello again, Mr. Angel," she whispered happily. "My mother sends her thanks. We got the medicine." Charles felt a warmth spread through him. It was better than any chemotherapy. "What is your name, little one?"
"I'm Mia."
"And you are Charles," she said, having noticed the embossed initials on his wallet yesterday. He smiled faintly. "Yes, I am Charles." "Mia, why don't you sit down and talk to me for a few minutes? I'll pay you for your time. The light is long here." Mia looked around nervously. "I can't stop selling, sir. The light might change." Charles nodded understandingly. "How about this? I buy everything in your basket, and then you sit with me until the light turns green." "How much is everything?" Mia calculated quickly, her brow furrowed in concentration. $47.15, sir." Charles pulled out $50 and handed it to her, taking the entire basket of candy. He placed the basket on the seat beside him. "Now, tell me about your mother." Mia, stunned by the sudden windfall and the purchase of her entire inventory, sat carefully on the low curb near the car. She spoke about Elena, her voice full of pride and concern. How Elena used to be a baker, how she made the best cinnamon rolls, and how now she was too weak to even stand up for long. She described the apartment, the smell of antiseptic, and her fear that one day the medication wouldn't be enough. Charles listened, truly listening for the first time in years. He realized that Mia's grief, though practical and active, mirrored his own paralyzing grief for Clara. Clara had been lost suddenly, leaving a sharp, impossible wound. Elena was slipping away slowly, forcing Mia to fight every single day. Both were defining battles against loss. He felt an impulse, strong and clear. "Mia, how would you like to come to my house tomorrow? I want to talk to you about something that might help your mother permanently." Mia's eyes grew cautious. "My mother told me never to go anywhere with strangers, Mr. Charles." Charles nodded. "A smart mother. I understand completely. Tomorrow I will send Arthur, my driver, and Mrs. Johnson, who has known me since I was a young man. She will talk to your mother, and if your mother agrees, you can both come to my home for tea." Mia considered this. She knew Charles was rich, not dangerous. He had sad eyes, like someone who also missed someone important. She finally agreed. "Only if Mrs. Johnson talks to Mama first." The next day was a complicated flurry of activity, an energy Charles hadn't felt in the house since before Clara died. Mrs. Johnson, dressed in her smartest suit, and Arthur, drove to Mia's address in a modest, struggling neighborhood. Mrs. Johnson, with her gentle demeanor and decades of experience navigating the complexities of human pain, spoke to Elena, explaining Charles's situation, the terminal diagnosis, the loneliness, and his desire to help. Elena was deeply suspicious, but Mrs. Johnson's sincerity and the sheer desperation of their medical needs eventually won her over. When Mia and Elena arrived at the mansion, the contrast between their lives and Charles's was staggering. Elena, frail and pale, leaned heavily on Mia as they entered the grand foyer. Charles met them in the sunroom, ensuring the atmosphere was soft and welcoming. "Elena," Charles began, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I know this seems sudden, and perhaps unbelievable. But I am a man with a clock running out. I have great wealth, no family who cares, and a desperate need to make sure this wealth does some tangible good before I go. Mia, your daughter, is the most courageous person I have met in years." He laid out his proposal plainly. He wanted to fund Elena's treatment entirely, moving her to a facility where she could receive constant, top-tier care, regardless of cost. He wanted to ensure Mia's education was paid for, forever. And most importantly, he wanted Mia and Elena to come and live in the mansion, not as guests, but as family. Elena wept, tears of relief and exhaustion. She protested, saying they couldn't possibly accept such a massive burden of kindness. Charles countered immediately. It is not kindness, Elena. It is a necessary transaction. I need life in this house. I need purpose. And Mia, she fills a gap here that has been empty for 5 years. Please, allow me this final act of grace, for my own soul. They moved in within a week. The transition was immense. Elena, though still very ill, found peace in the quiet, spacious rooms and the immediate access to specialized care. Mia, suddenly free from the burden of the candy basket, was initially overwhelmed by the sheer size of the mansion. She spent her days exploring the library, the gardens, and simply sitting with Charles, talking about everything and nothing. Charles found himself transformed. He was still dying, but he was no longer dead inside. Mia's laughter, light and quick, echoed through the halls that had been silent for too long. He started to eat again. He started talking about the future. Mia's future, not his own. One afternoon, Mia found Charles sitting in his study, looking particularly frail. He was holding a photograph of a beautiful young woman with bright, teasing eyes. "Is that your daughter, Clara?" Mia asked softly. Charles nodded, tracing the outline of the photograph with a shaky finger. She would be 25 now. She loved bright colors and loud music. Mia sat on the floor near his feet. "Where is her room, Mr. Charles?" Charles's face froze. "Up on the 2nd floor. But it's locked." "It has been locked for a very long time." "Why is it locked?" Mia asked, her child's logic cutting through the adult layers of grief. Doesn't she want people to remember her things? That question hung in the air, heavy and true. Charles realized he hadn't locked the room to honor Clara, he had locked it to protect his pain, to keep the memories sterile and untouchable. He had turned it into a prison for his own heart. Over the next few weeks, the bond deepened rapidly. Charles, who had lived a life of ruthless efficiency, found joy in the mundane, watching Mia color, helping her with math homework, or listening to her innocent observations about the world. Mia, in turn, recognized the man beneath the millionaire facade. She saw the fear of death, yes, but mostly the profound pain of loneliness. She would often simply hold his hand as he rested in the sunroom. One evening, as Mia was reading a book aloud to Charles, a habit they had developed, Charles looked at her small, earnest face, the way she paused to pronounce difficult words, and felt a surge of pure, powerful love. This girl, entirely unrelated by blood, had given him a reason to fight for his remaining time. She was the heir to his heart, even if she couldn't legally be the heir to his fortune, yet. He told her, "Mia, you came into my life when I thought everything was over. You are light, little one. Pure light." Mia smiled, leaning her head against his weak arm. "I think we were meant to find each other, Charles. If you believe destiny brings the right people together, type destiny in the comments now." The time passed too quickly. Charles's health took a sharp downturn. The doctors warned him he had only weeks left. He had immediately instructed his legal team to begin the lengthy, complicated process of formalizing Mia's guardianship and amending his will, ensuring the bulk of the estate was managed in a trust for her benefit and Elena's lifelong care. But the complexity of his estate, tied up in shell corporations and international assets, meant the legal process was agonizingly slow. His lead attorney, Mr. Davies, arrived frequently, bearing thick binders of documents. "Mr. Harrington," Davies said one morning, sternly, "we are running out of time. The adoption petition is stalled. And your cousins, the ones in Oregon, they've received wind of the changes. They are challenging your competency and threatening litigation. They argue that this child is an opportunist and you are mentally compromised." Charles felt a searing rage. My competency? I have never been clearer in my life. This girl is my family. But legally, sir, she is nothing. The cousins will tie this up for years in probate if you don't finalize something ironclad. We need to demonstrate that this is not a capricious decision, but a deeply rooted relationship. Charles looked at the door to Clara's room upstairs. He knew what he had to do. He had to face the grief he had meticulously sealed away if he was truly going to open his life up to new love. That evening, he called Mrs. Johnson to his side. Mrs. Johnson, I need you to find the key to Clara's room. It's in the safe deposit box I gave you 5 years ago. Mrs. Johnson gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Mr. Charles, are you sure? Yes. I need to go in there. Tonight. He looked physically weakened by the decision, but spiritually strengthened. Later, around 10 o'clock, Charles stood before the mahogany door. The wood was cold under his trembling fingers. He inserted the old, weighty brass key and turned it. The click of the lock reverberated through the silent hall like a gunshot. He pushed the door open, letting the light from the hallway spill into the darkness. The room was exactly as Clara had left it 5 years ago. A fine layer of dust coated everything, shimmering faintly in the light. Her bed was unmade. A half-read fantasy novel lay face down on the silk comforter. Her desk was cluttered with sketches of flowers and architectural blueprints. She had wanted to be an architect. The air, heavy and stagnant, smelled faintly of old lavender and teenage perfume. Charles stepped inside, the pain immense, a fresh, raw wound tearing open. He walked to the window, pulled back the curtains, and let the moonlight flood the space. He sat on the edge of her bed, touching the duvet. For 5 years, he had been afraid of this room, afraid of what the memories would do to him. He was right. The memories were devastating. But as he sat there, he realized something. The room wasn't just a monument to loss, it was a monument to love. And locked away in a drawer of her desk, he found a small, hand-painted wooden box. Inside, tucked beneath several letters, was a simple, diamond-encrusted silver locket, engraved with the initials CH. He recognized it instantly. It was his mother's locket, which Clara had always cherished and insisted she would pass on to her own daughter someday. He closed his eyes, accepting the wave of sorrow, but this time he didn't drown. He felt Clara's presence, not as a gaping void, but as a loving memory pushing him forward. He needed to ensure her legacy, the capacity for profound love, continued. And Mia was the embodiment of that continuation. The next morning, Charles looked renewed, despite his physical decline. He called Mr. Davies back to the mansion immediately. Davies was surprised to find Charles not in his study, but in the sunroom, wearing a soft cardigan and holding a small, silver locket. Davies, I have a solution for the challenge to my competency, Charles said, his voice firm. I am not simply adopting a child. I am securing the future of my only true remaining family. He had Mia join them. Mia, still slightly shy around the severe lawyer, approached Charles's chair. Charles gently took the locket and placed it around Mia's neck. This belonged to my mother, and then to Clara. Now, it belongs to you. Because you, Mia, are my granddaughter in every way that matters. He looked at Davies. I am amending the trust. The fortune is tied to Mia and Elena, with specific clauses for their health care and education. Furthermore, I want the locked room, Clara's room, to be made into a fully functioning studio for Mia now. Let her move her things in. Let her start living in a space defined by love, not loss. This room is the key, Davies. It proves my connection to Mia is rooted in the recovery of my ability to love and accept life again. The room has been locked for 5 years because I was paralyzed by grief. Opening it for Mia is proof of my sound mind and deepest desire. The symbolic weight of Charles finally opening Clara's room and dedicating it to Mia's future was enormous. It was the emotional evidence Mr. Davies needed. Within days, the legal machine moved faster, driven by the urgency of Charles's impending death and the incontrovertible proof of his deep, emotional commitment to Mia. The cousins' claims were significantly weakened. Mia watched Mrs. Johnson and a team carefully clean and repaint Clara's room, transforming it into a bright, safe space. It was still filled with memories of Clara, but now they were shared, not locked away. Mia was thrilled, recognizing the profound gift and the trust Charles had placed in her. Charles deteriorated quickly after the final papers were signed. He spent his final hours in bed, holding Mia's small hand, Elena resting peacefully in a nearby chair, surrounded by the warmth of family he had created in his last months. "Mia," he whispered weakly, "remember this. Love is not about blood. It is about choice, presence, and purpose. You gave me mine back." Mia cried, gripping his hand tightly. "I love you, Charles. You are my family too." He smiled, a genuine peaceful smile that smoothed away the wrinkles of years of sadness. Then, he simply closed his eyes, finally finding the peace that had eluded him for so long. The funeral was small but meaningful. Mrs. Johnson, Arthur, Elena, and Mia stood together, the true family unit that Charles had constructed. In the months that followed, Mia thrived. The room that had been locked for 5 years became her sanctuary. She began sketching in Clara's old notebooks, filling the empty pages with the promise of her own future. Elena, receiving constant, specialized care, stabilized dramatically. She began making small batches of cinnamon rolls in the large mansion kitchen, filling the house with the warmth and scent of home. Mia knew she wasn't just the inheritor of a fortune, she was the guardian of a legacy of unexpected grace. She honored Charles's memory not by mourning, but by living fully, studying hard, and always remembering the desperate intersection where destiny had intervened. Mrs. Johnson continued her role, now as a surrogate grandmother figure, watching over Mia and Elena with profound satisfaction. She often told Mia, Charles never found peace with his wealth until he found a way to share his heart. "You were the key, dear." The vast, silent mansion was quiet no longer. It was filled with laughter, the soft clatter of silverware, and the sound of life being lived fully. The greatest wealth Charles had left behind wasn't the 9 figures, but the knowledge that he had redefined his own ending, choosing love and connection over isolation. He had not died alone. He had died surrounded by the family his heart chose. If this story touched your heart, like and share with someone who is your true family.